Alright, now we're going to look at functions with parameters, meaning that it takes input to the functions and uses those input as part of its function or what it's tasked to do. Right now this example we've been building on has two functions with no parameters. There's nothing inside these parentheses. Right? They're both empty. For both of these. So we're going to modify these one at a time. Alright, so instead of display main, display message having the string inside of here, I'm going to take that out of there, place that in main now. Alright, and then I'm going to modify this a little bit so it's using something called MSG, just another variable, and that variable is actually going to be a parameter. It needs to be a string, so it's got to have a data type, and its name is MSG. So that MSG now is a parameter to this function that it's going to use as a local variable. So parameters, once they get to the function, become local variables to this function. Alright, so there's MSG, it's going to display the MSG. So this function is expecting an input, some data provided to it to display on the screen. Well, that's going to come from main up here. We now have message up here, and we're going to pass in message. Alright, so message is a variable that is local to main. Right? No other function can see message. Right? It's unique to main in this instance of message, and it's assigned hello world. I am then passing it to display message. So message in this call to this function display message is what we call an argument. It's data we are providing to the function to use. The parameter MSG is the variable that's receiving the data that's being passed to it. So it's going to receive the value that message has up in main and make a copy of it for itself and assign it to MSG. They are two separate variables, have nothing to do with each other. It's simply mapping this message variable, the value it has, which in this case is hello world, and assigning it to the variable MSG. Then this function will make use of that data and display it. Right? I'm not going to modify display message 2 yet, but you're going to see that this will continue to operate just like it was before, displaying the hello world message multiple times. Okay, so there you saw a compile error, and there's one thing I forgot to change. If you remember from the other video, I said the function header, which is this line, must match the function prototype. They do not match because this does not have the parameter list on it. Now they match. Right, it has the parameter list there now, so it matches, and this should now compile. So again, the function header and the function header and the function prototype must match. Alright, and here's the program running, and you see it's displaying the same thing as it was before, hello world, and then it jumps to display message 2, back to hello world, and so forth, because we got this loop going on in main. So each time main calls that function there, display message, it always passes it the same message, hello world. Alright, so let's go ahead now and modify it a little. So again, just to recap quickly, function prototype has got to match the function header. It's defining that it has a message or an input of a string data type. Will not take an integer, will not take doubles, it only will take a string. So the data, the argument we're providing it, has to be a string, which it is. That message variable gets mapped to the MSG message so that they get a copy. So MSG gets a copy of what message has and then uses it within its function. Alright, let's take it one step farther. We're going to take this message out of display message 2 and place that one in here. Alright, and we're going to add a parameter to this guy, which is also going to be a string, and we'll call it MSG also. Again, this MSG has nothing to do with this MSG. Alright, and we're going to pass it now message. This message, not the one that's in main, two different things. Alright, all these variables are very different. Alright, so this needs to change to MSG. Alright, so it knows to use the parameter, which is its local variable. Alright, so now all the functions have parameters except for main. They're both strings. They both happen to have the same name, but it doesn't matter. They are local to this function only, meaning it can only be used. So this MSG has nothing to do with this MSG. But this message gets mapped to this MSG. I know there's a lot there going on, getting very confused, but they got to match. This is a function call. So it says, okay, whatever message is at this point, I'll assign it to MSG up here when I make the call. All right, the names don't matter. I can change this to something else if I wanted to. All right, and then it just keeps running as it was before. Oops, we didn't change the prototype, so let's go up and do the prototype. We're going to get a compile error shortly. All right, this needs to be a string, and we're also calling it MSG. All right, there we go. Prototype's there now, and now we can go ahead and run. And you'll see that the output's same thing, 3 hello worlds and 3 calls to display message 2. Nothing has changed. All right, so we're passing data around. So we can even simplify this one a little bit more. I'm now going to take this variable out of there, and I'm going to put that one up in main. But obviously we can't have 2 variables with the same name, so we'll call this one message 2. And I'm going to change display message so that it has 2 parameters with 2 inputs to it. Alright, oops, can't do that either, but we'll call this one message 2. Alright, so I'm passing message, and then I'm passing message 2. Alright, so now this prototype matches the function, right? Did we modify the function yet? No, we did not, so let's add that now. So they match. Alright. And now we need to pass MSG 2 down there. And I'll come back to that in a second. Alright, so the prototype says it takes message, MSG, and then has a parameter of MSG2. Well, this message will get mapped to this MSG, meaning the value message has at this point is assigned to MSG. And the value message 2 has at this point of the call to the function will get mapped to the MSG2. So MSG gets a copy of message, MSG2 gets a copy of message 2. Alright, when it calls the function. So it jumps down to the function when it gets called. So this MSG is local. It's going to be used in the cout statement. MSG2 is also local, but all it's being done or used for inside display message is to pass it as an argument. Now here it's a parameter, it's now an argument. It's just terminology. Right? So this variable now is being passed to display message 2, which is now getting mapped to MSG here in display message 2, and it's being used to be displayed there. So now all the data is being passed from main all the way down into one function, which passes part of the data into the other function, and the output stays exactly the same. Nothing changes. Alright, so the important part is understanding the mapping of the data when we make a call. Alright, this message, since it's first in the list here of arguments, gets mapped to the first parameter in the function header. The second argument in the call gets mapped to the second parameter in the function header. If there were more parameters in the list, again, they would get matched 1 for 1. Since this has 2 parameters, this has to have 2 arguments. Alright? And then this one takes the data it was passed and passes it to another function. So you can constantly pass data around with no issues there. Alright? So those just keep running as they are, as I showed you. Alright? Remember the difference between parameters, that's in the function header and prototypes. The argument is in the call when you're actually calling the function.